Okay, part 2 of notes, we're going to talk about parallel versus perpendicular. So if the slopes of a parallel line, they're going to be equal. The slopes of a perpendicular line are going to be a negative reciprocal, or in other words, an opposite reciprocal. So, for example, if you have parallel lines, the M will be the same. So you'll have the M could be 2 and 2 on both of them. Perpendicular means opposite reciprocal. So if the slope was 2, that's a positive. So opposite would be negative. And reciprocal would be, instead of 2 over 1, it would be 1 over 2. So it would be a negative 1/2. So if you look at the examples below, we want to see, are they parallel, are they perpendicular, or are they neither? And so we have to rewrite the equations in slope-intercept form so that way we can see the slope. So just like in the previous section, we're going to move everything over so that y is by itself. We'll have y equals negative 2x plus 1. And so the slope for this equation is negative 2. When we rewrite this equation on the right, we get negative 1/2 x minus 8 equals y. So m is negative 1/2. The slopes are not the same, so they're not parallel. And the slopes are not opposites because they're both negative. And so therefore it's neither. In example 14, you'll see that the slopes, as we simplify as y equals mx plus b, both m's are 4/3. And so since they're exactly the same, they're parallel. Sometimes the way I remember it is parallel has the two L's next to each other. So they're like twins next to each other. And so they match, and the two slopes match, where perpendicular doesn't have matches next to each other. Okay. The other one I want to skip down to is 16, because 16 is a little funky. So we have x equals 2. And so that's going to give me a vertical line. And so remember, vertical lines are undefined. So the slope is actually undefined here. Where y equals 2, that gives me a horizontal line. And what I remember about horizontal is it has a z in it, and 0 has a z in it. And so horizontal lines have a 0 slope. Even though one of them is undefined, it actually is an opposite reciprocal. And so even though this one's undefined and this one's 0, they are perpendicular to each other. Okay. All right, going on to the next set of notes. This is the last page for this unit, or this section. We talk about x and y intercepts. So what's nice is when we're looking for intercepts, if it's the x-intercept, y will be 0. If it's the y-intercept, x will be 0. And so we call the x-intercept a couple things. It could be called the x-intercept. It could be called a root. It could be called a 0. And that kind of makes sense because we put in zeros. Or it's a solution to an equation. Okay? So if you hear those, they are referring to the intercepts, the x-intercepts. The y-intercept is just the y-intercept. So in this case on the graph, when x is 0, you'll see that y is, let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4. So when x is 0, y is 4. That would be the y-intercept. And then over here, x is negative 3 and y is 0. So when y is 0, that's our x-intercept. And it's where it crosses the axis. Okay. Now, how can I find it algebraically? To find it algebraically, if you're given an equation, to find the x-intercept, you're going to set y equal to 0. Because we know that the y is going to be 0. So if I'm given y equals negative 2x plus 5, right, that's given. To find the x-intercept, I'm going to put y as 0. And then I'm going to start moving things around. So I'm going to subtract 5. I get negative 5 equals a negative 2x. Divide both sides by negative 2. A negative divided by a negative will be a positive. So I'll get a 5/2 as x. What that means is my x-intercept is 5/2, comma 0. That's where it's going to cross the x-axis. If I want to find the y-intercept, I'm going to set x equal to 0. So I plug in 0. I get negative 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 5 is 5. And if you remember, we also know that because if it's in y equals mx plus b, remember the b is the y-intercept. And so that's why we get 0, comma 5. Okay, so there's a few practices on the homework that I want you to do. And then from there, you also have your Khan Academy due, so make sure you do both of those. Okay, so have a good day, and I will see you later.